The explosion leveled the outpost. Smoke claimed the night. But through the fire, Evelyn moved. The blast had torn the prefab walls off their bolts and scattered them like playing cards. Floodlights dangled from snapped cables, swinging useless halos through a haze of ash. The comms mast lay folded across the motor pool. A generator guttered, coughing sparks into puddles of burning fuel. Evelyn Stone pushed herself out from under a half-collapsed shipping container, ribs alight with pain. Her headset screamed a solid tone. Tinnitus and a dead net pretending to be the same thing. She blinked grit from icy blue-gray eyes and checked the facts. Rifle, 1. Magazines, 2. No, 1 intact, 1 cracked. Sidearm, present. Knife, present. Radio, fried. Lungs, smoky but functional. She tasted metal. Not blood, wiring smoke. Good, she could use that. A gust shifted the curtain of heat, and the night beyond the outpost flickered. Figures moving low, aiming lights, working a grid. Not rescuers. The sweep pattern was too tight, too eager. Whoever planted the charges had stuck around to count bodies. Evelyn flattened against the scorched container, letting the blaze between her and the searchers bloom hotter. Fire hid things from eyes and from optics. A wall of radiant heat could turn a person into a thermal rumor. She clipped a chemlight to her vest, cracked it without shaking, and slid it inside the container seam so the glow bled upward. An ember, not a beacon. She needed 3 things: elevation, a way out, and proof of life on her side of the net. Elevation was impossible. The tower was down, and the only high ground was the fuel berm now roaring like a dragon. Way out? The drainage wadi at the perimeter, a shallow scar that ran west to a rock shelf. Proof of life. She tapped the co-pilot's emergency trick from last mission and grinned despite herself. When radios die, steel speaks. Evelyn crawled to the tool locker wedged under the motor pool ramp. The door was warped, but a pry bar and stubbornness had always been cousins. She levered it open and found what she wanted. Flare gun, 2 flares, rescue strobe, duct tape, and a coil of paracord that smelled like gasoline. Boots thumped closer. Voices, low and certain. KIA. She didn't know the language, but she knew that word in everyone. Someone laughed the way men laugh when fear is an audience they plan to impress. She tied the strobe to the end of the cord, taped the strobe to the flare gun's grip, and slung the whole contraption over a cargo hook 10 feet away. Then she crawled the other direction. When she tugged the cord, the strobe would swing into view, bait for the sweep team to shoot at while she slipped through the heat shimmer. Smoke stung her eyes. She waited for the wind to pulse. Fire breathes in, fire breathes out. On the outbreath, she yanked the cord. The strobe bobbed into the open, spitting white knives. Shouts. A burst of gunfire shredded empty air. Evelyn rolled to the opposite side, hugged the glowing ground, and slid through the gap like a shadow the flames forgot. The wadi was 30 yards away across twisted fencing and a carpet of embers. She measured it in sprints. 5 yards to the busted JCB bucket, 7 to the crater lip, 8 to the half-buried tire, 10 to the fence breach. She went on the next outbreath, boots whispering on scorched sand. Every step a conversation with pain she refused to answer. At the crater lip, a flashlight swept so close she could feel the heat of its lens on her cheek. She let her face go slack, eyes hooded, and became wreckage. The beam slid on. She exhaled smoke instead of relief. 2 voices argued near the breach. One kicked at a helmet on the ground. The other took a picture. Evelyn picked up a fist-sized bolt, counted to 3 with the beat of her heart, and threw it deep into the fire behind them. The bolt sizzled, popped, and a blossom of sparks leapt skyward. Both lights snapped toward the noise. She ghosted past, shoulder-brushing torn wire, vest snagging and then freeing with a hiss of threads. The wadi welcomed her with its shallow cool, walls high enough to steal line of sight. She slid down on her hip and lay still, listening to the outpost crackle and the searchers mutter, and in that quiet, her world shrank to the sound of her own breath. In, out, alive. She keyed her dead radio anyway, a ritual older than luck. Stone, she whispered to nobody. KIA is inaccurate. Her plan drew itself in the dirt. Follow the wadi west to the rock shelf. From there, cut south along the low spine to the wind farm, the one with maintenance sheds and a line of sight to friendly ground. She would need water, a bandage, and 30 minutes where no one spotted footprints in ash. The blast had taken the outpost. The night had taken the sky. But the fire had given her cover, and sometimes cover was all a soldier needed to stand back up. Evelyn rolled to a knee, checked the mag, and started walking with the flames at her back. The wadi bent west, twisting through rock and scrub. Evelyn moved in low crouches, every step deliberate to keep from leaving tracks where ash was soft. The night smelled of burnt fuel and singed plastic, but the air cooled with distance from the fire. Behind her, the outpost still burned. Good. It would blind thermal optics for a while, but soon the enemy would switch to dogs, drones, and patience. She needed to stay ahead of all three. Halfway to the rock shelf, she found a rain barrel knocked onto its side, a dark puddle beneath. The water was warm and tasted of ash, but it kept her throat from seizing. She wrapped a strip of shirt around her ribs, bracing the ache enough to breathe without flinching. Thunder rolled from the north. No storm, just artillery or demolition charges echoing in the hills. A reminder that the night belonged to no one for long. At the wadi's mouth, she crouched, peering toward the rock shelf. A set of fresh boot prints crossed the sand there, too heavy to be her own. 2, maybe 3 men, scouts sweeping the perimeter. She slipped off the wadi floor and into the shadows under a cluster of thorny shrubs, listening. Voices drifted closer. They were relaxed, confident, the kind of men who thought the job was already done. One carried a flashlight, slicing the dark in lazy arcs. Evelyn palmed her knife, then reconsidered. Knife meant noise if it went wrong. Instead, she found a chunk of shale and skipped it across the wadi floor, far to their left. The flashlight swung that way. Both men turned their backs. Evelyn rose, silent and fast, and closed the gap. She struck low, using the butt of her pistol like a hammer into the flashlight man's knee. He dropped with a grunt. The second turned too late. Evelyn slammed him into the wadi wall and pressed his face into the sand until he went still. The first man clawed for his weapon, but Evelyn kicked it away and held the knife at his throat. His eyes went wide. She leaned in. "Quiet," she said, voice calm as falling rain. He froze. She stripped the radio from his vest, clicked through channels until she found the one the sweep teams were using. Static, then a voice. Sector clear. Moving to next grid. She smiled. "Good news," she whispered to the man on the ground. "They think this place is empty." Then she chopped him behind the ear, just hard enough to drop him into darkness. She dragged both bodies into the shrubs, covered them with dry brush, and collected their gear. 2 spare mags, a half-full canteen, and a single smoke grenade. Not much, but enough to turn numbers into problems later. The rock shelf loomed ahead, a natural stairway up to higher ground. From there she could see the wind farm, a line of towers etched against the horizon, blades turning slow and lazy in the night wind. She keyed the stolen radio once more. "Stone," she said softly. "Still not dead." Then she started the climb. The shelf crumbled under her boots, forcing her to dig fingers into cracks, ribs screaming with effort. At the top, the desert opened before her like a dark sea. In the distance, headlights crawled along the access road. Enemy convoy. Evelyn sank to her belly, watching. If they were headed to the burning outpost, that was time she could use. If they turned toward the wind farm, she'd have to fight again before sunrise. Either way, she smiled to herself, tasting blood and ash. "You left me for dead," she murmured. "Big mistake." Evelyn lay prone on the rock shelf, watching the convoy snake toward the outpost. 3 trucks, open backs, silhouettes of rifles bobbing. Perfect. They'd be busy with the wreckage for at least half an hour. She checked her stolen radio. Chatter buzzed, reports from sweep teams, confirmation of no survivors, and orders to secure intel crates. Her jaw tightened. They weren't just counting bodies. They were scavenging. She slid back from the ridge and circled toward the wind farm, keeping to the shadow of rock spines. The towers loomed closer, their blades groaning low like giants turning in their sleep. At the nearest tower, the maintenance shed crouched like a faithful dog. Padlock rusted, hinges tired. She popped it with the pry bar and slipped inside. The air smelled of dust and oil. Inside, a first aid kit, 2 fuel cans, an old work light, and a toolbox that hadn't been inventoried in years. She dug out gauze and antiseptic, patched her ribs with one hand, wincing through the sting. Then she found her favorite prize, a flare rack. 6 flares intact. Enough to turn the night into a theater. Outside, the hum of the wind farm masked distant engines. Evelyn climbed the ladder to the tower platform, flare canister slung across her back. From up here, she could see the glow of the outpost fire, the crawling lights of the convoy, and the scattered search beams. She could also see the secondary road cutting west, the only escape route. "They'll sweep this way next," she muttered. "Not if I steer them." She loaded a flare gun and pointed it skyward. The first flare hissed to life, streaking red over the desert before blooming into a star. She waited 3 beats, then fired a second flare far to the south. The spacing would make the searchers think someone was moving fast between points. The radio crackled. "Movement south of the farm. Intercepting." "Good." Evelyn smiled. She sent a third flare east, widening the illusion. More chatter followed, confused, divided. "Chase ghosts," she whispered. "I've got work to do." She descended the tower, grabbed the toolbox, and set about rigging the area. Wires strung between steel supports, trip hazards across the access road, and a can of fuel carefully poured into a line leading to a single flare at the end. If they found this place, they'd get fire, but not the kind they wanted. As she worked, her breath slowed, focus sharpening. The pain in her ribs dulled into a background hum. She was no longer just escaping. She was shaping the night, bending it to her will. When the last wire was set, she crouched at the shed doorway, rifle across her knees, listening to the night shift. The convoy's engines roared again, moving east now, chasing her false trail. Perfect. She keyed the radio one more time. "Stone," she said softly. "Still not dead. And now I'm ready." The night broke with the growl of engines. Evelyn stayed low behind the shed as headlights swept across the wind farm access road. The first truck slowed, soldiers dismounting, voices sharp now. Her flares had done their job. She waited until they were within the wires. The first man tripped, cursing. The second caught him, then both froze as Evelyn thumbed the flare on the ground. The line of fuel lit like a fuse, racing across the dirt toward them. They shouted, scrambling back, but too late. The fuel ignited in a wall of flame, cutting the road in half. Shadows leapt up the tower supports. Evelyn used the chaos to her advantage, rolling from cover and putting 2 quick rounds into the truck's tires. The vehicle lurched, blocking the road for the rest of the convoy. Gunfire answered, chewing through the shed's wall. Evelyn moved fast, circling the perimeter, using the wind farm's massive supports as cover. One soldier came too close to her angle. She dropped him with a controlled shot, then kept running. Ramirez wasn't here this time. No one was. She was alone, but she fought like there was a whole squad at her back. The enemy leader barked orders, trying to fan out. Evelyn cut him off by firing into the overhead maintenance light, plunging the area into partial darkness. The tower's blinking beacons cast strange, shifting shadows that turned friend into foe. Panic set in. Two soldiers fired at each other by mistake. Evelyn ducked behind the disabled truck, yanked open the door, and tossed the remaining smoke grenade under the seat. White fog billowed, cloaking her approach. She grabbed a pack from the floorboard, documents, maps, a sat phone, and slid out before the smoke cleared. When the last engine revved, trying to escape, Evelyn fired into the fuel line she had primed earlier. Fire whooshed skyward, forcing the remaining soldiers to retreat into the desert. The battlefield went quiet except for the roar of burning diesel and the steady spin of the wind turbines. Evelyn stood among the wreckage, chest heaving. Her gear was scorched, face blackened with soot, but she was still on her feet. She raised the stolen sat phone to her ear and hit transmit. "This is Stone," she said, voice flat. "Alive. Hostiles neutralized. Intel recovered." For a long moment, only static replied. Then a voice she recognized, calm, relieved, answered. "Copy, Stone. We have your beacon. Hold position. We're coming." Evelyn lowered the phone and turned toward the burning road. The fire painted her silhouette in gold and crimson, and for a moment she looked like part of the blaze itself. "They left me for dead," she said softly to the night. "Now they know better." The turbines turned, the fire died down, and Evelyn walked out of the wind farm toward the rising dawn.